Okay, welcome to this book launch with Keith Kahn-Harris and the Babel Message, a love letter to language. My name's Ross Bradshaw from Five Leaves Bookshop. In the background, doing the tech is Simon Griffiths from Five Leaves Bookshop. Normally, Keith Kahn-Harris writes about heavy metal and Jewish matters. Indeed, in April, Five Leaves is publishing a book with him called What Does a Jew Look Like? And it was originally going to be published in November, but Keith said that might be a bit awkward because he's got another book coming out at the time in November, this one. And I said, what's the book about? And he said it was on Kinder eggs. And I said, well, actually, I thought my hearing had gone wrong. And I said, Kinder eggs? Kinder eggs? And he said, yes, it's specifically a book about the warning message in Kinder eggs. And I thought, he's gone mad. My hearing is okay. He's wanting to do a book on this. And then he started on his Facebook collecting all sorts of versions of the message. And I only realized how nuts it was when I tried to explain it to my nephew, who speaks the Shanghai dialect, and asked him if he would write this message in Shanghai. Not surprisingly, he didn't, but I think that was to do with my explanation. But it's actually a very serious book with a lot of humor, and Keith does know what he's doing. Yes, it is about the message, but it's also a book on translation, on language, on linguistics, on linguistic conflict, on why language matters, on linguistic imperialism, on the languages of small communities and of communities that will never have an army or navy to defend their language. It's also a book on Ancient Sumerian, and it's on dialect, and thankfully including Scots. Above all, it's a book on why languages matter. It's also a seriously annoying book because this laptop that I'm on at the moment came with a warning message in various languages in the box. Now, normally I would just throw that away unread, but I can't now do that. And anytime I'm going to see a warning message, I'm going to feel obliged to read every single language and work out what those languages are. Worryingly, in Keith's book, he said that this is his first book on Kinder eggs, implying that there's yet more to discuss. It's also, by the way, a book about different forms of script, which is either a typesetter's worst nightmare or the most fantastic dream of a typesetter, to have to typeset in dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of different scripts. And I have to say that Icon, who published the book, have made a very, very good job of it. The format of this evening is quite simple. Keith will talk, and he'll also call up some of the contributors to the book, and he will explain that. If there's time, we assume there'll be time, there'll be question and answers towards the end. And we ask you if you could put your questions in the Q&A and we'll see them. But if you want to just chat to the people who are there, do put remarks, comments in the chat. So I think that's about all from me. Please welcome Keith Kahn-Harris.
Thanks very much, Ross, and welcome everybody. I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome you here, and I'm grateful to Five Leaves for hosting this event. If you don't have a copy of the book yet, feel free to order a copy from them. They posted a link below, and of course they will ship wherever you want. So what's this event about? Well, it's about something that's bigger than me, and in fact bigger than any of us. It's about these words behind me, what I call the message. The warning found in Kinder Surprise eggs, which in English reads, warning, read and keep, toy not suitable for children under 3 years, small parts might be swallowed or inhaled. The message has become a sacred text to me. I've even got a tattoo of it. Have a look at that. I got that today, in fact. There you go. I've probably just given my mother a heart attack. The book is also about the tool that built the message, language. Now, some of you may have wondered why I chose to introduce the event with an airing of the Moldovan national anthem. Well, that's because it's called Limba Nostra, or Our Language. And language is certainly something to write an anthem for. The trouble is, as I show in the book, Language is a habit of not doing what it's told. Indeed, Moldovan is a pretty troublesome beast. Some argue that it doesn't exist, that it's basically just Romanian. But my argument is that we need to have as many languages as possible in the world, so a salute to Moldovan, that troubled language, seems an appropriate way to start this event. My book emerged from my project to commission translations of the message into as many languages as possible. This evening, we're going to hear some of those translations in a range of tongues from some of the wonderful translators whose work appears in the book. We are also going to find out, and I'm very excited about this, whether my attempt to translate the message into Monegasque, the language of Monaco, was successful or not. And finally, we will be toasting the message itself and conducting a unique experiment via the medium of Kinder Surprise eggs. First, though, I'd like to say a few thank yous. There's no way around the fact that this is a pretty bizarre premise for a book. So I'm so grateful to my agent, Anthony Topping, for taking a chance on me and my book. And my thanks also go to the team at Icon Books, who have made my dream come true and produced a book that looks absolutely beautiful. This was a bit of a nightmare to edit, given the sheer number of languages in it and the sheer number of typefaces. So I'm really grateful to Duncan, Hannah, Thea, and Maria, the typesetter, for shepherding the text through production. I'd also like to thank Andrew, Hamza, Ruth, and Amy, who've done a great job in marketing the book. Now it's out in the world for everybody to enjoy the message. This was a book that took a village to produce. I'd like to thank friends on and offline for their interest and enjoyment of my project and for suggesting or providing their own translations. I'd like to thank my family, Deborah, Kobe, and Ella, and my parents, Paul and Margaret, for coping with this really bizarre chain of events in my life. Tonight, though, is about the people who are at the heart of the book, the dozens of people all over the world who supplied me, most of whom had no idea who I was, who supplied me with translations of the message in dozens of languages. I worked on this project during the COVID-19 lockdown and received translations almost every day for several weeks. And that was one of the things that kept me going during a really tough time. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for these gifts. Some of the translators are here this evening. I've selected a few that we will hear from, but I also want to give a shout out to Mari Car de la Cruz and her friends, who I'm told will be on the call. They helped me out with a number of languages from the Philippines, and some are here from the Philippines apparently, and some are from Qatar. Welcome, thanks for coming such a long way, sort of, and thanks so much for your help. In a moment, we're going to hear some translations into languages that most of you won't know. I'm going to kick off, though, by turning to my children. First of all, my daughter Ella, who isn't particularly into languages, managed to rewrite the message as a haiku. And my wife, Deborah, is going to read it on her behalf because she fell asleep.
So this is Ella's haiku. Warning, read and keep. Toy not suitable for kids. Parts might be swallowed.
There you go. And next I'm going to turn to Kobe, my son, who is a budding classicist, and he provided the Latin translation that appears in the book. Can you read it for us, Kobe?
Admonitum. Lege et tene, crepundium non idoneus liberis minoris 3 annis quam est, parvi partes in spirento et sobeanto.
There you go. That's the first time I've actually heard that. So thanks very much, Deborah, Ella, and Kobe, and I'm so grateful for your help with this book. But for the first of the other translators I'm going to turn to is going to be Sulev Eva from Estonia, who runs something called the Voro Institute, which is dedicated to the Voro people and their language. Sulev's going to explain a little bit more about that. Sulev's been a great help. He even translated the press release of the book into Voro, the language he's going to talk about in a second, and that was sent to people by my publicists, and I'm not really sure what people made of that actually, but I'm fantastic that he did that. So Sulev.
Hello.
Can I just check, Simon, are you putting the speakers, are you highlighting the speakers, because I can only see myself? Is that just my own view?
I am highlighting speakers, yeah.
Right, okay, fine, thank you. Sorry, Sulev.
Yeah, good evening. Can I share my screen now?
Yes, you can.
It does not allow.
Okay, don't worry about Sulev. It's your voice we want to hear. You could read. We could read your words in the book.
Okay. Then I just say to you hello or tere in Võro, and who am I? I am Jüve Sulev in Võro, or Sulev Iva in Estonian, and I am a linguist and a Võro teacher or lecturer in Tartu University and Võro Institute. And I am also father of 3 Võro Estonian bilingual children. And but what is Võro? Well, Võro is a South Estonian language, and I cannot show you a map, but when I try to explain it with my words. Well, Võro is situated Võro area in the southeastern Estonia, and Võro is a Finnic language. That means it belongs to the Uralic and Finno-Ugric group of languages, and more precisely in Finnic languages. And this South Estonian subgroup of Finnic languages, the biggest of them is Võro. And how many people uses or knows the languages or speaks? About 75,000 people speaks Võro. And altogether, Võro, Seto, Mulgi, and Tartu, all South Estonian languages, has about 100,000 people, speakers. And that means about 1/10 of Estonian speakers speak South Estonian languages. And actually, this Võro, Seto, Mulgi, Tartu, all these South Estonian languages are endangered languages today. That means we have not anymore natural transmission of language to children. My children are Võro speakers, but most of Võro parents didn't speak Võro to their children, and that's for we have very few Võro speaking children now. But on the other hand, we have many achievements. We have for children, we have cartoons in Võro. We have some dictionaries of Võro, Estonian, Võro. We have some language technology of Võro, but still we have quite several problems. We have no legal recognition in Estonia. Võro is like merely a dialect by Estonian laws. And we have only marginal use of Võro in the educational system. marginal use in media. And most people like Võro, but don't take it seriously enough. And very few adults speak the language to children, and very few children that therefore speak it as a first language. And it means we have very much work to do to ensure the future of Võro language as a living language. Yes, and basically that's shortly all about Võro. And should I now read out this message in Võro?
This is your moment.
Okay, that's my moment. Now, the Babel message in Võro. Hoiatamine. Loe ja nii. Seo mänguasi, kõlba alla 3 aastakaisile latsile. Nä võiva mängu tsillokesi juppe alla neelda, vai hindele kurkuaia.
Thank you so much, Sulev. Lovely to finally hear that, and you could read it in the book. And I say in the book, wouldn't it be wonderful if for 1 week a year during Võro Language Week, that Kinder Eggs bought in Estonian would feature a warning message in Võro. So let's hope it happens. I should also say that I invited the Estonian ambassador this evening, and he didn't respond to my email. So there you go. What can you do? Thanks, Sulev.
Wonderful.
And
thank you.
Next, we are going to hear from Professor Lily Kahn of University College London. She helped me out massively in the book. She provided me with Yiddish, the language that my great-grandparents would have spoken. But also, she co-translated into Greenlandic, into North Sami, I should say, and also into Ugaritic. She's truly an extraordinary linguist. But tonight, it's Yiddish that we want to hear from.
Thank you so much, Keith. I really enjoyed being a part of this amazing journey, which definitely brightened my spirits during lockdown. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Yiddish. I think some of the audience already knows about Yiddish, but for those who don't, this is an introduction to Yiddish auf ein Fuß, on 1 foot. So I think Yiddish, as many people know, is the traditional language of Ashkenazi Jews, Central and East European Jews. It's around 1,000 years old, though its origins are subject to quite a lot of debate. It is thought to have emerged somewhere in Central Europe, possibly in the Rhineland, possibly in Bavaria. And it's a Germanic language, like obviously German, also Dutch and English and the Scandinavian languages, though it's most closely related to High German. And it's always been written in the Hebrew script, as you can see from the text behind me. So it's had a Semitic component, mostly Hebrew, some Aramaic, which is a sister language to Hebrew, from its earliest days, in common with most other Jewish languages of the diaspora. From around the sort of 15th to 16th centuries, the bulk of the Ashkenazi Jewish population had settled in Eastern Europe, and the kind of shift of sort of the core of the Ashkenazi world had moved eastward from the German regions into mostly Slavic-speaking areas in Eastern Europe. And so what most of us think of when we refer to Yiddish is actually what's technically called Eastern Yiddish, as opposed to Western Yiddish, which is the Yiddish that kind of stayed behind in the in Western Europe, so Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands. So Eastern Yiddish, which from now on I'll just refer to as Yiddish, developed quite a substantial Slavic component, mostly from Polish and Ukrainian. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor of sort of some of the basic vocabulary of Yiddish, quite a lot of it is Germanic and very close to German. So for example, kind, child, plural kinder, is in similar to German. Egg. There's some Hebrew. So for example, continuing on with our theme of the Kinder surprising, the word for surprise in Yiddish is chiddush, which comes from the Hebrew component of the language. And then there are some very basic words as well that you kind of just encounter in sort of an everyday Yiddish sentence. You can't go too far without encountering some Hebrew words, like for example, mishpocha meaning family, levona meaning moon, dira meaning a flat or an apartment. So not just words to do with Jewish culture that you might expect to come from the Hebrew component, like Shabbos and Hanukkah and Yom Kippur, but really lots of everyday vocabulary. And then the Slavic component also, though it's smaller, it's very prominent in sort of the everyday language. So for example, you have a lot of words for family members like plimenik, nephew, zayde, grandfather, bobe, grandmother, and then other words sort of from all areas of the language, like pushke meaning a jar, ozere meaning a lake, jabe meaning a frog. So Yiddish has a very rich literary tradition from the medieval period onwards, and in the 20th century it kind of turned into a sort of very thriving vehicle of a modern literature with all kinds of original and translated works on everything under the sun, with a very large press in interwar Eastern Europe, a cinema industry, a very kind of well-developed theatrical tradition. Obviously, the Holocaust dealt a really decimating blow to Yiddish and resulted in the dispersion of its speakers, those who survived, away from Eastern Europe. Now the language still has around an estimated possibly 1 million speakers, but of those, the majority are Haredi, particularly Hasidic, so strictly Orthodox Jews, and in Haredi communities, the language is really thriving and is being passed down to younger generations and has all kinds of cultural, there's literature and film and plays, and it's kind of really thriving, despite the fact that it has minority status and it's really not kind of recognized or given state support. Outside the Haredi world, Yiddish is still, even though it has a much lower rate of transmission to younger generations, there is sort of a growing interest in learning Yiddish among many people of Ashkenazi heritage and others all over the world. And there's summer courses and all kinds of ways to learn Yiddish. So that's just a little bit about the language to give you a feel for what you're about to see. So I'll just read out the warning. This is the Yiddish translation. So Azhore, lehnt und halt bei sich. Die Zatzke ist nicht passig für Kinder, wo sie jünger von 3 Jahren. Sie können Cholila robschlingen oder einatmen kleinschige Chalokim.
Thank you so much, Lily. I should say that Lily has done amazing work during the pandemic, translating health information into Yiddish for the strictly Orthodox community in Stamford Hill. I should also say that Kinder Surprise eggs are certified as kosher. So actually, according to one kashrut board, so I don't know, but so there is actually a case for having a Yiddish message inside the Kinder Surprise. So thanks again, Lily. Our next speaker is, if he can unmute himself and put his camera on, is Nicholas Al-Jalou. Now, Nicholas Al-Jalou is someone who I owe a massive apology to. He is a lecturer at Kadir Has University in Istanbul, and he is an expert on Syriac and modern Assyrian languages. And this is, and I say in the preface to the book, I'm sure I've screwed something up. I'm sure I made a mistake somewhere. And of course, I made a mistake in transcribing the messages that Nicholas wrote for me. So it's lovely to be able to make a public apology tonight to you, Nicholas.
That's fine. I mean, it's so amazing to be part of such an amazing, of a wonderful project that brings together people from all over the world that speak so many different languages. I don't think this has ever been done before, and I think what you've embarked on is something that hopefully will bring more and more people together to sort of understand each other more in a human way, humanistic way.
So can you explain something about what Syriac is and what modern Assyrian Aramaic is before you read out the Western versions of each? Those are the ones in the book.
Modern Assyrian and Syriac are sort of Aramaic languages. So Aramaic is, as Lily mentioned, a Semitic language that is a sister language to Hebrew. And originally Aramaic was the language of the Arameans who lived in northern Syria and parts of Mesopotamia at the end of the 12th century BC. By about 1000, they ruled a string of kingdoms between Damascus and Aleppo, which dominated the history of that region for about 3 centuries, though in conflict with or sometimes as vassal of the rulers of the more larger Assyrian Empire. Now, inscriptions from those city-states thus make Aramaic one of the world's oldest recorded living languages. So due to Aramean migration eastward, the western periphery of the Assyrian Empire became bilingual in both Akkadian, which was the original language of the ancient Assyrians, as well as Aramaic, as early as the mid-9th century BC. So as the Neo-Assyrian Empire started expanding and conquering Aramean lands west of the Euphrates River in what is now Syria, Aramaic was adopted as its second official language and eventually supplanted Akkadian completely. So already by this time, a uniform written form of Aramaic had been developed in Assyria, and with its rise to prominence as a lingua franca under the Assyrians, their influence led it to becoming a prestige language. So from about 700 BC, Aramaic was used as a major means of communication in diplomacy and trade, especially throughout Assyria, Babylonia, the Levant, Egypt, and Asia Minor. Now, at its height, after the fall of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, which was around, 300 BC, Aramaic was spoken in several parts, in several variants all over today's Middle East. And as a result, local vernaculars became increasingly prominent. And that fanned the development of a dialect continuum and widespread use also by different religious communities. So dialect continuum with different written standards. So Aramaic's long history, its extensive literature, and its diverse and widespread use by different religious communities, including Christians and Jews, are all factors which have led to the development of so many divergent varieties. So as it stands, as we see, there is not one singular static Aramaic language, and each time and place had its own variation. So from early Christian times onwards, we see that there is a clear distinction between what we call Mesopotamian or Eastern Aramaic and Levantine or Western Aramaic. And the dividing line was roughly the Euphrates River. So some varieties of Aramaic are also retained as sacred languages by certain religious communities. And most notable among them is Syriac, which is the Eastern Aramaic or Mesopotamian Aramaic literary variety used as the liturgical language of Christian communities of ethnic Assyrians and Maronites throughout the Middle Eastern diaspora, as well as St. Thomas Christians in India. So by the end of the 2nd century, Syriac was one of the several varieties of Aramaic that emerged bearing regional characteristics in and around the kingdom of Osroene, which is centered around the modern Turkish city of Şanlıurfa. And that, or what was known as Classical Syriac, became that kingdom's official language. As I said, it later became the language of Assyrian Christianity, with its golden age between the 4th and 8th centuries AD. The literature written in Syriac is by far the largest and most varied in any Aramaic dialect. Syriac translations of Greek medical works, literature, and scholarship often served as intermediaries in the Arabic translation movement of the 8th and 9th centuries. So thus, Syriac served as an important contributor to the mainstream of medieval Islamic and Western European civilization. Moreover, Christian missionary activity in the Middle Ages led to the spread of Syriac from Mesopotamia through Persia into Central Asia, India, and China. Now, coming to the modern Assyrian languages. So today, the more widely spoken Eastern Aramaic forms are largely restricted to Assyrian, Christian, and Jewish communities from northern Iraq, northeastern Syria, northwestern Iran, and southeastern Turkey. And they're divided roughly between Eastern and Western dialect groups. So today, I would say there are about 1.5 million speakers of these Aramaic dialects in varying degrees of, I would say, proficiency. Probably 1 million speakers of Eastern Assyrian, modern Assyrian, Aramaic, and maybe 500,000 speakers of modern Western Assyrian Aramaic. Now, having largely lived in remote areas as insulated communities for over a millennium, the remaining speakers of these dialects have retained the use of the once dominant lingua franca despite linguistic pressures experienced during the subsequent large-scale language shifts throughout the Middle East, most notable of which was the Arabization that began with the 7th century Muslim conquests. However, Aramaic is now considered endangered because of the fact that many speakers of the language are now in diasporas. So the Jewish speakers of Aramaic are mostly in Israel and have become Hebraized or are living elsewhere. The Christian speakers of Aramaic are in the West, and they're largely assimilating into Western societies. So yeah, it is considered an endangered language, and it could become extinct in the near future. So would you like me to read the examples? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Why don't you read the Western Syriac and the Western Modern Assyrian, because those are the ones that are in the book.
Will do. So the Western Classical Syriac. So the difference between the Eastern and the Western pronunciations is the vowel system. So long A and O, etc. So the Classical Syriac says Zuhoro, Qriu Natar, Shi'yo Loho Shahl Shawre, Dal Taht Men Tlot Shnin, Qet Ez Ure, Msint Mith Bul'in, Aut Mith Nushmin. The modern Assyrian Aramaic, very similar, says Zuhoro, Qriu Natar, تشتئنيو لكو معلق لشورد للتح مثلو تشنه فلق نعيمة كيبن دمبلوعي أو دمنشومي.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Nicholas.
Thank you.
The first word, interesting, the word for warning is very similar to the Yiddish, which was Azora. And what Nicholas said is quite similar to that as well. And in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, it'd be Azhara. So, and you can also see in the book, you can see biblical Hebrew and Talmudic Aramaic, as well as Judeo-Arabic. So thank you, Nicholas. Next,
thank you.
One of the most important things in my book was to raise the profile of some of the lesser known languages of the British Isles. And our next speaker is Damien Labas. Damien had a book that came out last year that was serialized on Radio 4 called The Stopping Places, a journey through Gypsy Britain. And he is going to give us the message in Anglo-Romani. And trooper that he is, he's written it out and he's holding it up rather than sharing it. So tell us about Anglo-Romani, Damien.
Sorry, I wrote it out by hand because I couldn't get the screen share to work. So Anglo-Romani is a composite name because it's a language which results from the meeting of two languages, English and the Romani language. Can you hear me, by the way, because I'm using this headset I'm not familiar with? The Romani language, which is linguistically unrelated to Romanian, Romanian being a Romance language like Italian, Spanish, French, as I'm sure you're aware. Romani is a language of Indian origin, closely related to Sanskrit and other modern Indian languages like Urdu, and it's been spoken in Europe since the Middle Ages. It's the language of Roma people, or perhaps better and more widely known as Gypsies. And Roma or Romani people have been present in Britain since the late 15th century, and they arrived speaking the Romani language, probably in Scotland in the time of James IV of Scotland. Pretty well, not soon, but within about 100 years, it seems that people of Romani descent were speaking two languages. Some were speaking Romani, and others were speaking a mixture of English and Romani. And certainly by about 1614, as we can see in a document called the Winchester Confessions, there are records of people known as Gypsies speaking a mixture of English and Romani, which Gypsies have never referred to as Anglo-Romani themselves. It's a scholar's term. My family, like most Romani travellers, call the language just Romani or Romanus, or the lingo, or Poggedy Jib, which means the broken tongue in our language. So Anglo-Romani is an academic term, really. Academics have referred to Anglo-Romani as a mixed language, a contact language, a Creole, and they debate, which of these categories it belongs in. Some people say it's actually just a dialect of English, which I'd say in some cases it is, when people's vocabulary has sort of declined to the level where they're just putting one or two Romani words into an English grammatical framework. But we do still have some odd fragments of old Indian grammar in Anglo-Romani, including an abnormally productive nominalizing genitive form, which isn't found in many other Romani dialects. So if that hasn't thoroughly confused you, I will read my best attempt at translating the Kinder Surprise message into Anglo-Romani. I have to say, I found it slightly frustrating, possibly because my command of the language is not brilliant, but also because translating technical messages I always find difficult. I have inherited from my family quite a good ability to describe rural scenes, everything from the setting up of wagons to the management of horses, farm labour, hunting rabbits or hares, that sort of thing. That vocabulary came down to me in quite a rich form, but I'm not so good in other areas, but this was the best I could come up with. Goldie, Dick this Lilin Lelit, Chavies cover kept kushti for tickners, biddier and trin bershes. Biddy covers can be ordered gel up the neck.
Brilliant. Thank you, Damien. And we also have in the book a translation into one of the Eastern European versions of Romani as well. So it's interesting to compare the two. Thanks very much. There's a bit of background noise. If you can mute yourself now, I'm very grateful for all your help, Damien. But we're now going to go from one contact language to another. We're going to go to Mark Sanchez, or his pen name is MG Sanchez, who is a novelist from Gibraltar, although he now lives in Yorkshire. His books are great, and I would recommend them to anybody for their insight into Gibraltarian culture, past and present. And he's going to tell us about Llanito, the language or the dialect or the contact language of Gibraltar.
Hello, Keith. As you know, in Gibraltar, English is the official language. By this, I mean that it's a language used in schools, in courtrooms, and at the public counters of government departments. but in the street and at home, in cafes and at the beach. In other words, in informal contexts, most people speak llanito, which is it's a form of Spanish mixed primarily with standard English, but also containing traces of Maltese, Genoese, Moroccan Arabic, as well as Anglicisms and made-up words that are not to be found anywhere else. For instance, we have the word flus, which is Maltese and it means money. We have marchapié, which is Genoese for pavement. We have safi, which is Moroccan Arabic for enough. And in terms of Anglicisms, I'll give you as an example, chuar, which is sort of the llanito version of choose in English. It's been the word choose has been anglicized. The word choose has been turned into a llanito variant. And as far as made-up words are concerned, we have, for instance, chula creme, which is a cream cake, or one of my favorites, which is rather mystifying in many ways because nobody knows exactly how we came up with this. It's alikindoi, which means to be on the lookout for something. So these are just some of the examples that you find in llanito. This is how I grew up as a child, speaking English in the classroom and at school, but llanito in the playground and at home. I'd say that listening to a llanito speaker is interesting because they will be continually switching between English and Spanish, sometimes as much as 4, 5, or 6 times in a single sentence. I think it's almost like a form of ping pong when you listen to it. You know, this constant, this pendulum-like movement between languages, between English primarily and Spanish. Also, I would say the Spanish in llanito is quite different to standard Castilian Spanish of the type you'd find in Madrid, for instance. I mean, to somebody from Madrid, yes, it may sound similar to Andalusian Spanish, but if you cross the border from Gibraltar into La Línea, which is the nearest Spanish town beside the rock, they'd probably tell you that our sort of Spanish doesn't sound very similar to theirs. This is because Gibraltarians don't just remove 1 or 2 letters from their endings like the Andalusians do. We lop off whole syllables. In effect, you could call llanito a form of extreme Andalusian, with the oddity that you'd be hearing many words and phrases in English as well. And how does this all sound in practice? Well, if you go on YouTube and Google llanito, I'm sure you will find some very interesting spoken examples. But I'd like to end this little intervention by reading some quick lines from an unpublished short story of mine, in which 2 young men in the 1990s discuss in llanito whether to get a normal job or to follow a life of crime. And I'd like to read this extract. It's very short. Not because I think many people will understand it, but just so that you get a feel for the rhythm of llanito. So here we go. Pero Quillo, ¿qué está hablando? ¿Te ha vuelto loco algo? You can't seriously be thinking of joining the fire brigade. But why not? Algo tendremos que hacer once we leave Bayside, no, bro? No es que somos tú y yo gente del piso or anything like that. Because there's no flush in that game, pichón, that's why. Lo que hay que hacer es echar caja y comenzar a ganar billetes serios, compa. No coger un chapú donde te van a tratar like shit. Do you know what I mean? See, I know what you mean, brother. But I still think it's not a bad thing to get a proper job. So there you go. That was a very short example of llanito. I like to describe it as a language of the streets, as opposed to the sort of more formal English that you find in formal situations.
Like Kinder Surprise eggs.
Exactly.
So can you read out your llanito, attempt at a llanito
Okay.
Kinder Surprise egg?
Okay, here's my attempt to transcribe the message into llanito. Warning. Lee esto y no lo tire. Juguete not suitable para saber del menos de 3 años. Small parts might be swallowed or inhalado. And that's it.
Thanks so much, Mark. There are 2 versions of Yonito in the book. Really interesting to compare the 2 and to compare how Mark writes it compared to Dale Buttigieg, who did the other one. Complementary rather than competing ones. And here's hoping for the day when Yonito will appear on the Kinder Surprise warning message. Finally, we are going to hear from the author of the translation that ends the book, Fernando Lopez Menchero, who is going to be telling us about a language that's very strange and very, very special. And there was no better one to end the book with it.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for this opportunity to participate at the launch of the Babel Message. And as you know, modern Indo-European is quite a strange language since it's really not spoken today in our geographical point. It's not really related to a peculiar country or to a region, but it has the vocation to become a language as a reconstruction of an ancient language and become something more universal. So I will shortly explain what is modern Indo-European. Can you see me and hear me well?
Yep. Yeah, we can.
Great. So the Modern Indo-European project is an initiative aiming at the revival of a language similar to the ancestral one, which existed over 5,000 years ago and gave birth to most languages spoken today in Europe and also in other continents. So the project has also been possible thanks to the co-foundation of Carlos Quiles, who wrote the first grammar, and whom I contacted some 15 years ago, and also the help of other insightful researchers and collaborators. So our reconstruction is based on scholarly knowledge, such as comparative research, papers, theses, and seminar proceedings. So I keep updated on what is published about the primitive language in European, about what a certain word or what a certain phonetic phenomenon was, and I keep these results. And so from these results, from these papers, I usually take words or sentences or styles or something which is peculiar in modern Indo-European. So what methodology and approach are adopted for the determination of modern Indo-European language? So generally speaking, concepts related to universally common activities in life, such as to go, to eat, to come, to be glad, to be born, to die, are straightforwardly reconstructed since pendants of the original word are widely found in daughter languages. So modern Indo-European tends to be as similar to Proto-Indo-European as possible. So if we really had a Rosetta Stone, so modern Indo-European would be the primary language. Unfortunately, there are no extant texts of the original Proto-Indo-European language. So we cannot be certain 100% of how it was. So we have different schools, we have different ways of reconstructing it. So I adopted most mainstreams in this reconstruction. So as you probably know, the original Proto-European language is usually reconstructed by means of roots, prefixes, or rather suffixes and particles. Our text involves certain common roots such as "pelt," to be awake, "up," to adapt, "legs," leg, to pick, collect, which is used here to express the concept to read. So as happens with legere in Latin, and also with another root, lesen in German or lacit in Latvian, where they use a somewhat different root, which is less. So I will read aloud the text of the Kinderrecht, so you will probably understand nothing at all, because so after 5,000 years, most words remain quite different. So, but the text will sound something like this: Prop authors. Lege sekrekve. En aptam putnamus upatrisuat asiratva. Paulaas aitis en kemantor anontorve. So in this translation, I had to accept the tough challenge of translating the word toy, for which we do not have a clear proper word in the proto-language. And we only find sparse isoglosses for the reconstruction of the activity to play in Celtic and Germanic, and also other semantically more remote terms in Persian and Russian. So does it mean that Proto-Indo-European children and puppies rarely played? So surely not. So I think this activity really existed, but we don't have a mean to reconstruct the exact word. We have to take the most probably most probably root or extent to keep in modern European. So in any case, I am very happy to participate, although indirectly, in this intriguing story where my translation appears in a key point of the book.
Thank you very much, Fernando. So basically, if any of you find yourself in the Pontic Caspian steppes 5,000 years ago, and you're giving a Kinder Surprise egg to a kid, Fernando will tell you what to say. And as I say, it's the translation that ends the book. So we are running a bit short of time. I'd like to thank all the translators who turned up this evening. I'm going to do this very quickly. This was going to be the big reveal, but as I say, we're running out of time. In one of the chapters of the book, I try and translate the message into a language with as little work and effort as possible. And that language is Monegasco, the language of Monaco. It's in the book. I did it in an hour. The problem is I couldn't find anybody who would check it for me because virtually nobody actually speaks Monegasco, the language of Monaco. But I have now actually, since the book was published, I've actually managed to obtain a translation. So what I'm going to show you is my translation and the real translation. And just give me 1 second. Being suggested Monaco people in there. Anyway, so this was I'm going to minimize me so you can see it. This was my translation into Monegasco. I'm sorry, I can't get rid of my head. I'm really sorry. I'll duck down. There you go. That's my translation that I did in an hour. In fact, in this very room. And this, sorry, having a few technical problems. I'm really gonna have to really go down low. This is what it should be. No, there you go. There you go. So basically, I'd like you to type in to the chat box your mark out of 10 for my translation into Monegasco. My one is the one above, the real one is below. And I should say, the brilliant thing about this translation is they've developed a way of writing it involving diacritics that don't appear in any other language, which for a language that has a few dozen speakers, I think that shows commitment. Anyway, can you type in mark out of 10 for my Monegasco translation? Coming back now. 5, 4, 3.5. Oh, okay. 10 if people understood it. 6, 10 from Mark Sanchez. Well, there you go. Because Mark gave me a 10, I will plug his latest book now, which is called 11 for Effort. I didn't make much effort. I did it in an hour, whoever put that in. So Mark Sanchez's latest book is called The Fetishist. And that's what he gets for giving me a 10. We are now going to the final bit of the evening, and I am going to stop sharing my screen, if I can. There you go, that's me. So now we come to the toast. As I said before, if you wish to be seen and haven't already done so, please press the raise your hand button and you can start your videos if you want. Right. Now, I'm going to give you some very clear instructions for this, so don't mess it up. The toast is going to be to the message, right? The warning message, to the message. If you have a Kinder Surprise egg with you, and you should have done, and you should do, I should say that my mum told my dad to go out and buy Kinder Surprise eggs, and my dad bought Kinder Joys, which are not the same thing at all, and they don't have a warning message. Anyway, when I say go and not before, please unwrap the egg, ignore the chocolate, open the yellow capsule, ignore the toy, and find the treasure that is the warning message. It looks something like this, right? Once you've done that, I will give you further instructions. So, I know, Joys, they're not available in the States. It's one of the great injustices of the world. Kinder Joys are, though. So, if we are all ready, let us hold, you can unmute yourselves if you like. I don't know if we're allowed to. Let us hold our Kinder Surprise eggs high in the air and proclaim the toast to the message. To the message. To the message. Okay.
To the message.
To the message.
To the message. Okay.
To the message.
Right. Get unwrapping. I'm sorry if anybody doesn't have one.
Oh.
The chocolate is not the point. The toy is not the point. Right? There you go. You've got, there's the yellow bit. That's supposed to, it's yellow because it's supposed to be the yolk. Right? Oh. I don't care what the toy is. No interest whatsoever. It's plastic shit, basically. You will find two pieces of paper, one with an illustration of how to make the toy, and the other bit, detach it, and you will find what I call in the book the manuscript. This is the manuscript. Occasionally, if you are very, very lucky, you will find another warning message that is specific to the toy. If anybody has got one of those, please let me know, because you occasionally find a separate Moldovan message on those, occasionally. Anyway, right. Now we're going to finish the event.
We've got the message. Have you only got one piece of paper?
One piece of paper.
Okay. Only one piece, but it's quite rare to find the separate one. Now we're going to finish the event with a little experiment. If you look to the bottom right-hand corner of side 2, side 2 is the one without the little face in it. The bottom right, you will find a tiny 7-digit number. Bottom right-hand corner. This is the serial number of the warning message sheet, and there are many different versions, and they're archived online in a place I call in the book the Codex. Now, my favorite, the one on which the book is based is, I'm going to type it in, is 7901. Wait a sec.
It's an 8-digit number on mine, Keith.
I can't count.
No.
So you might be right.
Right.
I could be wrong. Anyway, that is the one the book is based on. The book is based on 79013029. Does anybody have that one?
No.
No.
8856.
Okay. So what I want you all to do is type in the serial number you've got and where you bought it. Because this will be an invaluable addition to my ongoing research on this precious manuscript and may form the basis of the sequel. There's not going to be a sequel. My agent Anthony is on the call. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to sell a sequel. Very specific one there from Rosemary, Yeed and Morrison's. I'm going to collate these afterwards. We can save the chat. Right. They're very, very different. I should say what my one is. 79018852.
Me too.
That's fine.
Me too.
So there appears to be a local North London kind of thing. Interesting. But my sister has got a slightly different one, interestingly. Sainsbury's Finchley Central, a different one, a completely different one. Yes.
We've also got one from the same Sainsbury's, Finchley Central, where the warning message and the instructions are attached to each other in one long piece.
No, they always are. That's not as big a discovery as you think, Nick.
Oh,
sorry.
Mine came, well, my one came separately.
Now, there are people who collect, were they separate? Actually, one thing you sometimes get is, if you're very, very lucky, they're usually folded vertically, but occasionally you might get one that's folded horizontally. Did anybody get one that was folded horizontally?
No.
Rosie, well done. You win a prize.
Yeah, cool. What's it? Another Kinder Egg?
I can send you one of the fake tattoos. I can send you a fake tattoo. I bought a load of fake tattoos. It's not a real tattoo.
Oh, yeah. Send me a fake tattoo. That'd be brilliant.
I'll send you a fake tattoo. And I should say as well, and I've got an article coming out in this tomorrow on Byline Times, that I've actually discovered at least 2 mistakes in the message, in the manuscript. And Sulev, I'm sure, is as disgusted as I am that the mistake is in Estonian. Oh, my son's one was folded horizontally as well. Excellent. The mistake is in the Estonian. There is a diacritic there that doesn't actually exist. There is also a mistake in the Azerbaijani as well. But rest assured, I have informed Ferrero, the company that makes them, and that there's a mistake in the Estonian one. And if you buy one of these eggs in the future and the Estonian message is correct, then that's my doing. I will have changed history.
Well done.
Are the variants worth something? Lindsay asked. There are people who collect them. There is a site called, I'll type it in, eurocat.de. But not many people collect them. You can look up the complete list of them.
So you're saying usually the instructions for the toy and the message are attached to each other, sometimes not.
They're usually attached, occasionally not, and there is occasionally a second warning message where the toy requires a more specific thing. And those are the ones that occasionally you find in Moldovan and Romanian. How many types of toys are there? There are thousands. There are people who collect this stuff. It's massive in Germany, which is why I have hopes for selling the translation rights in Germany. So there are others in this field of research. Conference coming up. Well, the fact is, Lindsay, I have emailed German Kinder Surprise collectors, including people who collect the warning message, and none of them ever reply to my email. So there you go. The book is based. I talk a lot about this site Eurocat, and they will not respond to me. I don't know why. So really, I'm a lone wolf. Does the mistake make it a heavy metal message? Absolutely. Ross says, I hope you are on commission as I've never bought a Kinder Egg before. Really, I'd rather you didn't buy Kinder Eggs after this moment. As my friend Louise, who just posted in the comments, she texted me yesterday saying she wasn't going to buy a Kinder Surprise Egg because of the plastic waste. And Louise, I salute you. After this, don't buy any more. In fact, to be honest, if I could just buy the warning message, I would just buy the warning message. But, you know, if you need, James says, somebody's written to them in German, James. My friend Torsten wrote to them. They still didn't reply. Okay, so there we have it. I would like to thank once again 5 Leaves for hosting this. I would like to thank Sulev, Nicholas, Lily, Damien, Mark, and Fernando for being real sports, and everybody else. And also somebody I forgot to thank who's on the call is Megan Paul, who was the one who not only supplied me the translation in Braille, but printed it out and also told me a lot about how Braille works, because I thought it was just letters. It's actually much more complicated and much more interesting than that. So, and anybody else who provided translation on this call or introduced me to someone, thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful. And if you enjoy the book, Please share on social media. I'm not proud.
Right, on behalf of Five Leaves, my only suggestion would be Fry's chocolate cream next time, please. It's so much nicer than the chocolate. I couldn't resist eating some of that chocolate, and I can guarantee
It's
I will never
rubbish.
buy
It's really bad
Kinder Eggs.
chocolate.
It's really, really awful. I'm not surprised it's illegal in America, but on grounds of taste, it would be better if it was illegal. So, thanks, Keith. Thanks everybody for taking part. Simon may well put up the buying link if he's still with us, but otherwise you can buy it from independent bookshops all over the place, and specifically from Five Leaves Bookshop, should you so desire. I think that's about it.
Yeah, my next book will be on something with 70% dark chocolate. That's what Louis, to respond to Louis' comment.
So I think we're done. We done? Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody.